What if the biggest mistake in the car industry wasn't building electric vehicles, but assuming everyone was ready for them? A few years ago, that idea would have sounded ridiculous. Every headline pointed in the same direction. Every major automaker seemed locked in the same race. The future was electric. Tesla was expanding at a speed nobody had seen before. Chinese manufacturers were flooding markets with cheaper EVs. Governments were announcing deadlines for gasoline engines. To many people, the winner had already been decided, and yet, while the rest of the industry sprinted toward the same destination, one company appeared to be standing still. Toyota. Critics called it stubborn. Investors questioned its strategy. Industry analysts wondered if the company that once revolutionized transportation had somehow lost its way. But Toyota wasn't standing still. It was waiting. And years later, we're starting to understand why. Because behind closed laboratory doors, engineers were working on something that challenged one of the biggest assumptions in the automotive world. Not that electric vehicles were bad, but that they weren't the complete answer at first. Almost nobody paid attention. After all, why would they? Electric vehicles were dominating conversations. Every month brought another announcement about longer range, faster charging, or bigger batteries. The momentum felt unstoppable. Yet Toyota kept asking a question that few others wanted to discuss. What happens in places where charging stations barely exist? What happens when someone needs to drive hundreds of kilometers through rural roads? What happens when electricity infrastructure grows slower than expected? The company wasn't looking at the future through the eyes of Silicon Valley. It was looking at the entire world. And that difference would shape everything that followed. For Toyota, the challenge wasn't building the most advanced vehicle possible. The challenge was building something that worked for the largest number of people. That philosophy became the foundation of a strategy many people misunderstood, while competitors focused on a single path. Toyota believed the future might require several electric vehicles in some regions, hydrogen in others, and hybrids filling the enormous gap in between. It sounded cautious, maybe even outdated. But then something unexpected started happening. The EV market began revealing cracks, not fatal cracks, but real one's. Charging infrastructure expanded slower than many forecasts predicted. Battery costs remained stubbornly high. Long-distance travel continued, creating anxiety. For some drivers, cold weather affected performance, and suddenly, questions that had once been dismissed became impossible to ignore. Toyota had been watching all of it, patiently, quietly. And this is where the story starts to get uncomfortable. Because if Toyota was right, then the debate was never really about electric versus gasoline. It was about practicality. And practicality rarely generates headlines. That's when reports about Toyota's next-generation hybrid system began attracting attention, not because it was flashy. Not because it promised to change the world overnight, but because it was designed to solve problems people actually faced every day. The new system wasn't just an update, it was a complete rethinking of how hybrid technology should work. Engineers focused on something most drivers never notice until it's gone: smoothness. In older hybrids, transitions between gasoline power and electric power could sometimes be felt a slight hesitation, a subtle shift, a reminder that two different systems were sharing the workload. Toyota wanted those moments to disappear. The goal was simple: make the technology invisible. Let the vehicle decide everything in the background, while the driver experiences only effortless motion. But that was just the beginning, because the real breakthrough wasn't what drivers could feel, it was what they couldn't see. Deep inside the system, Toyota redesigned the relationship between the engine, motor, battery, and software. Every component became smarter, every decision became faster, every watt of energy became more valuable, and the results could have consequences far beyond fuel economy. The electric motor became smaller, yet more powerful. The software became more intelligent, yet less noticeable. The battery became more efficient, yet required less space individually. Those improvements sounded minor together. They started changing the equation, because suddenly, hybrids weren't simply economical alternatives. They were becoming something else. Something much more competitive, but this only matters once you see what happened next. The real secret wasn't the engine. It wasn't even the software. It was the battery. For years, battery technology has been the center of the automotive revolution. Whoever builds the best battery often controls the conversation. Tesla understood that. BYD understood that. And Toyota certainly understood it. The difference was how Toyota approached the problem. Instead of building massive battery packs capable of powering entire vehicles, Toyota focused on extracting maximum efficiency from smaller batteries. That decision changed everything. Smaller batteries cost less, they weigh less, they require fewer raw materials, and they can recharge continuously while driving. Most importantly, they remove one of the biggest psychological barriers for consumers, the fear of running out of power. Every time the driver slows down, every time they brake. Every time energy would normally be wasted, the system captures part of it and stores it quietly, automatically, without asking for anything in return. Over time, those small moments create a surprisingly powerful advantage, especially in cities. Especially in heavy traffic, especially in the places where millions of people spend hours every week behind the wheel. Toyota's decades of experience gave it something newer competitors couldn't easily replicate. Data. Millions of vehicles. Millions of drivers. Billions of kilometers. Every success, every failure, every lesson. All feeding into the next generation. Suddenly, Toyota's long wait no longer looked like hesitation, looked like preparation. And that's when the competition became impossible to ignore, because Toyota wasn't challenging small players. It was stepping directly into a battle with some of the most influential companies in the world. Tesla continued betting on an all-electric future. BYD expanded aggressively across global markets. Honda refined its own hybrid systems. Each company believed it understood where transportation was heading, but Toyota introduced a different possibility. What if the transition isn't a straight line? What if the world moves through stages rather than leaps? What if the most successful technology isn't the most advanced one, but the one that fits reality best? Those questions are becoming harder to dismiss, particularly in regions where infrastructure still lags behind ambition. In many countries, charging stations remain scarce, electricity networks remain inconsistent, consumers remain cautious, and millions of drivers still prioritize convenience above everything else. Toyota understands that, perhaps better than anyone, which explains why the company isn't keeping this technology limited to niche vehicles. The plan appears much larger. Popular models. Family sedans. CROSSOVERS. SUVs. Vehicles used by ordinary people every day, because Toyota isn't trying to win a technological showcase, it's trying to influence the next decade of transportation. And if that strategy works, the impact could be enormous. Millions of vehicles, millions of consumers, millions of decisions shaped by a single belief that the future doesn't have to arrive all at once. Maybe that's the most fascinating part of this story. Not the technology, competition, not even the cars themselves. It's the possibility that an entire industry may have been asking the wrong question. For years, people argued about whether electric vehicles would replace gasoline vehicles. But perhaps that was never the real debate. Perhaps the real question is much simpler. What solution actually makes life easier? Because history rarely belongs to the technology that generates the most excitement. It often belongs to the technology that quietly solves the most problems. 20-5 years ago, people laughed at Toyota's first hybrid. Today, hybrids are everywhere. Now the company is making another bet. And whether that bet succeeds or fails may reveal something important about the future. Not whether electric vehicles win, not whether hybrids survive, but whether progress is really about choosing one path or having the wisdom to recognize that different roads can lead to the same destination. And if Toyota is right about that, then the future of transportation may look very different from what everyone expected. The strange thing is that Toyota's biggest advantage may not be the Technology itself, it may be timing because, for the first time in years, consumers are beginning to ask questions that sound very different from the ones they asked before. The conversation was simple. How fast is it? How much range does it have? How futuristic does it look? Today, the questions are becoming more practical. How much will it cost me over 5 years? What happens if I take a long trip? How difficult is maintenance? Will this still make sense 10 years from now? Those aren't the questions that create viral headlines, but they are the questions that influence purchasing decisions, and Toyota has spent decades building its reputation around exactly those concerns. That's why many analysts are paying close attention to what happens next, not because Toyota's new hybrid system guarantees victory. Nothing in the automotive industry is guaranteed, but because it enters the market at a moment when consumer priorities may be shifting. Imagine to drivers. The first lives in a major city with chargers on every corner.